Hey everyone, I'm Tanner from the investment team at the LegalTech Fund. Today on In Studio, we have a returning guest, Adam Miller, CEO and co-founder of MIDAO. Last time Adam Miller joined us, he explained how a former finance professional with no legal background ended up drafting a law for a Pacific Island nation and why a 120,000 person sovereign state became the most forward thinking jurisdiction for decentralized organizations. That was the origin story. This episode, we're going to go further. So, Adam, we're going to go through what is actually working, where is adoption growing, what the shift in the US regulatory environment means for founders building in this space right now. So, let's kick it off with a huge question. What has changed since we last spoke?
Yeah, thanks. And it's great to be here, Tanner. I'd say the biggest thing that's changed for MIDAO since we last spoke is that the Marshall Islands has become one of the leading jurisdictions in Web3 to create the legal structure for a project or for a component of a project. So we've signed up over 300 projects to create their DAO LLC, which is what the entity is called, in the Marshall Islands. I'd say the other big shift is probably that when we started MIDAO, we were really focused on DAOs, or decentralized organizations, as you put it, as our target market. And what we've learned is that any Web3 project needs a legal structure. And irrespective of how decentralized the project wants to be, they need a jurisdiction to domicile that's crypto friendly in terms of its token laws, its security laws, other laws. And so we have as much business coming from Web3 projects in general as we do from DAOs specifically.
I love it. Maybe, to double click on that, whether it's Web3 or on the DAO side, what is maybe the most common thing founders in either of those buckets tell you that they wish they had done earlier?
It's a good question. One of the hard things about creating a legal structure, especially offshore, which tends to mean anywhere outside the United States or wherever the founders are based, is that it's expensive. And even though the Marshall Islands is meaningfully less expensive than the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, for example, it still costs, literally 100 times more than creating a legal entity in Delaware or Wyoming. And so whereas in the United States, a lot of people, as soon as they have an idea for a business, they might go create their LLC with LegalZoom, and they have their legal entity up and running for $50 or $200, and then they start operating. If you're looking at an offshore structure, you're looking at more like at least $5,000 to $10,000, and so it's really hard to create your legal structure before you have some traction. Now, whether that's simply feeling confident enough that your product is going to have some traction, or whether that's having investors who have already given you money or are ready to give you money, the cost can be a significant barrier. And so founders are always often dealing with this question of, well, when is the right time to do this, given that it's so expensive in the early days before there's traction and funding. And so we try to make this easier for founders by giving them meaningful discounts if they create their entity before they're funded and before they have much money available in general. But I think that remains a big challenge. It's just, when do you create your legal structure? And then even beyond that, maybe phase one of your legal structure is just the LLC local to where the founders are, but your future legal structure is a global, multi-entity. Often we see 2 or 3 entities eventually, at least for a crypto project, similar to how VC funds often work. And so, when do you do the first, and when are you ready to actually create your global multi-entity structure for your project?
I love it. And, on that, when you talk about founders making that initial decision long before the, multi-entity structure, when they're thinking about the costs associated or the speed associated with the US or offshoring, maybe touch on the US regulatory environment. What's shifted and what does that mean for founders who are choosing a structure today?
It's a great question. So, of course, you could analyze this for founders of all kinds, but in Web3, where we focus most of our attention, things have changed a lot, even very recently, in terms of the US legal and regulatory environment for Web3, for crypto, blockchain, et cetera. Even just this week and last week, there have been significant announcements, in particular, one big one coming as a joint statement from the CFTC and the SEC, So the organizations that traditionally regulate commodities and options trading, and then the SEC for securities, they finally released a statement saying how you know whether you're a commodity or a security or neither or both at different times. And it doesn't quite make it yet to the level of official rulemaking, which is coming next. But this statement is just massively important for any crypto project, any project that wants to do crypto in the United States. So irrespective of whether your legal structure is in the Marshall Islands or the US or anywhere in the world, you need to worry about the US regulatory environment if you have any activity in the US. For a long time, even large crypto projects with billions of dollars in funding have actually excluded Americans from participating in their project because of either the lack of clarity or the even adversarial nature of US regulators. And that's really all changing now. There's also the passing of a stablecoin bill several months ago. And then right now, there's a bill called the Clarity Act, which is a law that I believe already passed the House and it's going through the Senate or the other way around. And Congress people are really hoping to get this passed before the end of the current session that provides even more clarity and goes deeper than even the other two things I mentioned. So all of this is awesome. It's great for everyone all over the world. It doesn't really negate the usefulness of a multi-jurisdiction legal structure, but it does make things better for everyone, and it will also allow some projects that are just focused on the United States to just use the US legal structure and not worry about offshoring so much.
I love it. I'm going to take us in a completely different direction. There's a concept out there that AI agents should have or require a legal identity. Want to hear your thoughts on what this might actually look like?
Yeah, I love that. And we're really excited about doing legal entities for AI agents. The idea is that, so today, if you have an AI agent running on your computer and you give it access to do things out in the world, whether that's writing software, whether that's purchasing services or getting paid for services, just like any other activity that you do out of your home, the liability for that activity falls on either you as an individual, or if you're using your work computer and you're doing this as part of your job, the liability falls on the company that you work for. And I think what people are going to find is that just like with other new projects, you want to consider whether you want to use a legal structure that separates assets and liabilities and other concerns between the AI agent project and the rest of your work. And the big difference is with AI agents, these AIs are actually taking action in the world. And so we also want to give those AI agents a lot more power than you would traditionally give to a piece of software. You might want, for example, those agents to be able to enter into contracts with other parties. And if you want to do that, then what we think is a great structure is actually the DAO LLC, which, by the way, we could get into this, but we're renaming it soon so that it doesn't sound like it's only for DAOs. But with a structure like this, you're actually allowed to appoint an algorithm as a manager of an LLC. And then the owners still have to be either natural or legal persons. And so this is it's a really good kind of way of thinking about governance of AI and AI agents, because AI agents need to be governed and we want to give them power. And so this is a way to kind of achieve both. You make an AI agent really independent in the world by actually making it the manager of a legal person, while at the same time ensuring that it's still governed by humans and the humans are ultimately responsible for what it does.
It's a fascinating thought process. Maybe, zooming back to today, where do, the Marshall Island structure genuinely win, and when should founders look somewhere else? Because I'm sure there's some folks listening that are thinking about an offshoring decision.
Sure. So I think there's a couple considerations worth mentioning. One is that if an entire project is taking place in one place, so for example, a traditional software company that's just in San Francisco, and maybe they'll have customers around the world, but everything they do, their investors are in California or mostly in the United States. Their founders and developers are in San Francisco. There's really no reason. And in fact, there's risks associated with going offshore for your legal structure. So that remains the case today. I think that if you're looking at offshore entities, if that is appropriate because your project is truly global in nature and you're looking for good crypto-friendly jurisdictions, The main reason to go with the Cayman Islands still or Switzerland is if you're looking for a place that has been used for a long time. And so, for example, the Cayman Islands has been providing entities in crypto for over 10 years. And so people are just already comfortable with it. And so let's say you go to a VC firm and you say, hey, I want you to invest in my project. And you say, I'm a Cayman company or a Cayman foundation. The VC says, oh, good. That's what we've been dealing with for the past 10 or 15 years. Let's move on to the next question. If you say you're a Marshall Islands DAO LLC, it's still possible that that VC has never heard of the Marshall Islands being involved in the crypto industry. Even though it's already a leader in the shipping industry as well, that knowledge doesn't really transfer over. So you could call it the Lindy effect. You know, it's kind of this sense that when something's been around for a long time, it actually does give it real value and power because people are familiar with it, they're comfortable with it. Lawyers and law firms that work in crypto have been working with Cayman for a long time versus asking your lawyer, hey, I want to do something that we think is better and more innovative, but you're going to have to learn some new things to work with it. And so I think that's the biggest reason that people would choose to go Cayman, Swiss, BVI, et cetera. If projects are really looking for the best and most flexible structure that's actually even at a lower cost and easier to use, the Marshall Islands generally does win on those merits.
I love it. Last question here. For forward signals, what are you thinking about? What are you tracking? What are you watching?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mentioned earlier that we're actually allowing companies soon to use different words in the name of their company. So until today, a DAO LLC has to put the word DAO LLC in their company, their official company name. And we found that already a lot of our Web3 projects are not DAOs and they don't want to have DAO in their name. Not only that, but when people see it's called a DAO LLC on our website, they say, oh, well, if it's a DAO LLC, we're not a DAO. So we should go look elsewhere. So we're a new law that's hopefully passing soon. It also has some other benefits associated with it. But the new law allows companies to call themselves a digital LLC or a DLLC as alternatives to DAO LLC, still take advantage of all the benefits of the framework, like the AI agent governance capability, without even having to call themselves a DAO. So the reason we're doing that is because not only is that increased clarity for people we're already seeing, but I think the trend in crypto is that there's a big change happening in the world of DAOs. There's a sense that a lot of people started DAOs originally for regulatory arbitrage to try to avoid falling foul of SEC and CFTC rules, for example. But now that those rules are clarified and people are more comfortable running their crypto project however they believe actually makes sense for them, they don't feel the need to form a DAO just for the regulatory arbitrage. And so that greatly reduced the number of DAOs people were creating. And a lot of the people who created DAOs for that reason have actually failed because it's a bad idea to choose your governance structure based on some kind of regulatory arbitrage if it's not actually a good fit for your project. What we're seeing now is a continued growth of real DAOs and real on-chain organizations of all kinds and organizations that want to do things in Web3. That growth, has continued from the beginning of crypto through today. I think we just had a bit of a bubble that has subsided, and now we're growing again from a more modest place. And I think there's also, genuine concerns about decentralization from a governance perspective. Most people know when I tell them what a DAO is, they say, why would I want to help govern my local nonprofit? Or I don't want to be on the board of my company, or I never vote in my shareholder elections for the stocks that I own. And so it is a real consideration to think about when is decentralization of governance actually valuable versus when is it something that should be avoided because it's simply not necessary and it's hard to do. And so I think we're also seeing just a lot of more intelligent thinking about, should you start a DAO in the first place? Should you decentralize governance? Do you need a token? Is there actually a utility, a value of having a token, a crypto token, playing some role in your ecosystem aside from just either governance theater, regulatory arbitrage, or hoping that you get lucky and your token goes to the moon? And so now it's real projects doing real things, leveraging these tools, technologies, and governance approaches that I think we'll see over the next several years. We'll have a lot of success.
Absolutely fascinating stuff, Adam. And we're excited to continue tracking it alongside you. Everyone else, thank you so much for joining us in studio. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Tanner.